Hi, is this Katie?
Yes, this is Katie. Hi, Steve.
Hey folks, George is fun.
Hey, George. Steve Brickman here.
Hey Steve.
Hey, this is Chris. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, Chris. Yeah, you sound really good. Are you in the Studio X?
Of course.
Yeah.
Stretched out on the couch, relaxing. You know how it is.
That's good. It's Monday morning. Welcome.
Hey, this is Larry Mogil with Thycotic.
Hey, Larry.
Good morning. How's it going?
What's the name of this podcast again? I forgot what our name is.
Maybe a bumper up top.
Maybe I'll just add that back in and post. Wait a minute. Here we go. The Modern Digital Enterprise Podcast. I think that's what we're going with. Welcome to either Device Squad or the Modern Digital Enterprise Podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet Podcast Network.
As a leading technology consultancy and reseller, Anexinet helps clients provide a complete digital experience for customers, employees, and end users. We accomplish this through our holistic approach, which encompasses all aspects of today's digital journey, end-to-end. Anexinet partners with top technology vendors like HPE to offer products and services that enhance the digital experience across customer engagement, enterprise mobility, cloud and hybrid IT, and analytics. Because great digital experiences rely on the smooth operation of all interconnected elements. From strategy through execution, we deliver custom multi-channel applications, including web, mobile, chat, and voice. With self-service apps for customer loyalty and enterprise apps that streamline internal processes, now you can reimagine legacy applications to propel your business forward. Anexinet also helps you embrace modern cloud and hybrid IT infrastructure to provide a seamless experience at every touchpoint, empowering you to recover quickly from disaster, scale to meet demand, and automate systems for perfect performance 24/7. And to maximize your competitive advantage, we ensure you always deliver the best experience possible by continuously honing your digital solutions through data-driven insights. So, how do you know if your business has what it takes to provide the complete digital experience? One that sets you apart, maintains competitive edge, and turns users into passionate fans? Simple. Just give us a call. Together, we can deepen engagement and make every digital experience remarkable.
Anexinet has several podcasts, and one of them is hosted by one of our co-hosts, Chris Hayner with Anexinet.
Good morning.
He runs what was Anexipod, which is now going to be called the Infrastructure Modernization Podcast.
That's the one.
And also Buffer Overflow, the Buffer Overflow podcast. Other than Chris, we have George Contino is with us. And George, what's your role at Anexinet? I'm sorry.
Digital Consulting Services. I am a director of digital consulting with Anexinet.
Thanks. And today we're going to be talking with Katie McCroskey, who is Director of Knowledge Management and Partner Training at Thycotic Software, and Larry Mogil, who is a Strategic Channel Account Manager at Thycotic Software. And Thycotic is a cybersecurity company. And that's the last time I'll make that joke. They are the cloud leader in privileged access management. So, Katie, I always like to start off by just asking the guests to talk about their own journey in technology, their professional journey, and how they wound up where they are.
Of course. So, hello, my name is Katie McCroskey. I am the Director of Knowledge Management and Partner Training at Thycotic. And to be honest, I kind of stumbled into tech and Thycotic. I was working and living in Ohio, finishing up my MBA, and actually working at Progressive Insurance. Decided that I wanted to move someplace else and started looking around for open positions and literally stumbled upon Thycotic. At the time, we were about 10 people. We were actually more focused on helping organizations in the DC metro area build code better. So we had a suite of agile related programming services that we offered to local organizations, programming help, developers, and agile coaches, things like that. We did have our products available. Secret Server, which is our flagship product, was already on the market. But really, I would say at that point, we were a services company. I was the first woman hired into Thycotic. Technically, I think I'm employee number 5. But very quickly, we transitioned into a product company really focused on our cybersecurity solutions that help organizations secure all aspects of privilege. So with the market and the feature functionality of our products continuing to increase and develop, the market became more and more interested in what we had to offer, and the company really just kind of blew up. I'm actually not a tech by nature. I kind of taught myself everything over the years. I've been with Thycotic for over 10 years now. So, through the years, I've just kind of taught myself the technical components and the security aspects of our product and the industry. And that has led me to where I'm at today, which is the Director of Knowledge Management, which is a kind of fancy title for I'm the trainer. I help our new hires, our partners, and our customers become better empowered and knowledgeable on all of our solutions.
Great, thanks. Larry, do you also want to give your background?
Sure. I also fell into technology a bit, but it was many more years before Katie, certainly. And through the years, I've looked at a variety of different technologies and worked with a variety of different technologies, dating all the way back to the beginning of mainframes, and then getting into virtualization and storage that included disaster recovery, and most recently, working with a group of people joining security and working for Thycotic. Some of the people that I work with and work for here at Thycotic are people I've worked with in the past. So for me, it was a no-brainer, not just looking at the technology, but looking at the people really drive our organization and lead our organization. So it was really a no-brainer for me to join the organization a couple of years ago, and haven't looked back since.
What keeps you interested in security at this point? What was it that sparked some interest for you in the first place, and what is it that keeps you interested?
One of the things for me for security is there's always something new to learn. It's constantly changing, as we see with machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI, some of the new threats and new technologies that are coming out. It's fascinating. There's a cat and a mouse game to it. I like the fact that we're helping organizations secure their environments, and we're not saving the world, but on some level, we're doing good in this world. So I think that that's something that also feels good about cybersecurity.
For me, the way I look at the market, and I've been in a lot of different technologies, these days more than ever, security is everything. There are many great technologies in the marketplace, but if companies don't have their security posture nailed down and are proactive doing so, then it could be catastrophic to these organizations. And helping customers meet those challenges is really what drives me. When you look at some of the companies that have had breaches over the last couple of years, and they're big household names, right? Think about the resources these big companies have, and in spite of that, they're still having met with security challenges. And then if you look at smaller companies in the mid-market space who don't have the resources of these global enterprise accounts, their challenges are that much greater because they don't have the people, they don't have the process. So the ability to help both these customers in the mid-market as well as the enterprise is really what drives me forward working for Thycotic.
Why don't we just go into a little bit about Thycotic, the company itself? Could you give a little more background into, the company's history? I know, Katie, you gave a little bit in your intro, but just a little more about what Thycotic does, what you specialize in, and what's your differentiator in the marketplace and so forth. That would be great.
So Thycotic helps organizations secure all aspects of privilege. So as I'm sure you guys are aware, not all passwords are created equal. And as we see with most of these organizational breaches, the target for hackers is privilege access. It's one level of access to, hack a salesperson or a marketing person's box. But as a hacker, that's not really the level that they need to get to the necessary data that they're trying to access to fully execute a malicious type of breach. And so that's really where Thycotic comes in. We have a flagship product called Secret Server, which helps organizations secure privilege access. So if you think of it at its most basic level, it's a secure vault used to store and delegate access to privileged accounts. But the real benefit comes in its active capabilities. So for example, it can look into an organization's network and discover unknown privileged accounts like local administrative accounts, whether it's Windows, Unix, Linux, all different flavors, can help organizations find their service accounts so they can start actively managing those. Full, workflow capabilities in terms of controlling who has access, just-in-time access, full monitoring, reporting, auditing capabilities, but also, most organizations, when we think about, simple steps that can exponentially help their security posture, it comes down to just general password hygiene and making sure that organizations are controlling access to privileged passwords, that they're running long, strong passwords that change on a consistent basis. And that's a lot of the automation and capabilities that Secret Server brings. We have some other products too. Our Privilege Manager solution helps organizations secure endpoint and application privileges. So if you think about, where the breach starts, it starts on the endpoint, the desktop or the laptop. So making sure that there's no points of privilege escalation there for a hacker to exploit, really locking down all aspects of local security. And then of course, applying application control. So not only do we see lots of organizations that are interested in implementing a least privilege approach, but we also see organizations leveraging this tool to prevent nasty malware and really ransomware attacks. That seems to be a large driver. I'm sure you guys have seen in the media some of the catastrophic organizational breaches and the costs associated with those recent ransomware attacks. So, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. And that's really what it comes down to when we're thinking about privilege manager and locking down endpoint and application controls. My favorite product is actually our tool called Privilege Behavior Analytics. And this leverages machine learning to establish behavior baselines on all privileged user activity. So the whole goal of privileged behavior analytics is to, identify when things get weird. It's looking for anomalous behavior, things like, 3 a.m. sensitive system access, IP addresses coming from Russia, folks that are, exploiting their privileges and accessing too many systems simultaneously, which would be out of character. Another tool that we just recently introduced onto the market is called DSV DevOps Secret Vault. So I'm sure you guys might know some developers, might have a few friends that build code all day. They typically care more about convenience than they do security. So they have a nasty practice of hard coding or embedding passwords into their CI/CD pipeline for automation. And although this helps keep things fast, it doesn't help keep things secure. And so our DevOps Secret Vault helps organizations eliminate these hard-coded or embedded passwords throughout their CI/CD pipeline and really just make that whole entire environment more secure. We also very recently introduced a new product called Account Lifecycle Manager. And the whole goal of this tool is to help organizations manage non-human accounts like service accounts from cradle to grave. So if you think about most organizations have a lot of service accounts. They have no idea where these accounts are being used inside their network. They're hesitant to, rotate the passwords or decommission these accounts. It creates account sprawl. It creates vulnerabilities. These are very powerful accounts within the network. And so the whole goal of Account Lifecycle Manager is to provide the capabilities to organizations to be able to manage non-human accounts the same way they would a human account, right? All starting off with the provisioning process, making sure that there's proper approvals and owners as service accounts are provisioned, making sure that there's a capability for periodic check-ins to validate that that service account should still be in use. And then, of course, decommissioning and end-of-life cycle type of accounts once those service accounts have fulfilled their requirements. So I think when we think about, the PAM market space and some of the other vendors that we see, a large focus of what Thycotic does is usable security. We want our tools to be easy to use, easy to implement, and adapt to an organization's network and their needs and their requirements. I think a lot of the other enterprise vendors in the space, they have, maybe older solutions that have more of like a classic architecture, and they don't really bring some of the scaling and usability and customization and extensibility capabilities that Thycotic brings across all of our different products. So that's kind of who we are and why we win.
That's awesome. This might sound goofy, but we have some chickens here, and
like actual chickens.
Yeah, you might actually hear them during the recording here if they get really loud. But one thing I always like to do is to tell like a chicken analogy or somehow relate chickens to the subject being discussed. One, because I think it's hilarious, and two, because it enables me to keep writing off the chickens on my taxes. So, but what I was thinking about is that it's not really that different from having a chicken coop. It's not that much of a leap, because with a chicken coop, you have to protect against a lot of different threats. So you not only have to have the hardware cloth all around, which is like a really strong metal, sort of like chicken wire kind of stuff to keep out coyotes and things like that, but you have to extend it beyond the perimeter of the coop, like about 8 inches along the ground, so that an animal will be dissuaded from digging underneath and getting into the coop. So you got that threat. Then you've got to protect. You've got to have like enough security in your latches and so forth, because raccoons are very smart, and they can actually figure out how to unlatch like a complex latch on a chicken coop. So you got to lock that all down. And then you've got to have it where the actual openings are small enough that a raccoon can't reach in, because a raccoon will reach in and it'll just grab a chicken and it'll just rip it right through the fencing that you have, and it'll eat the chicken. And then you've got the threat of hawks from above when the chickens are out and about. And that sort of reminds me of like a notification system, because in every flock, at least one chicken is called the sentinel chicken, and that chicken will actually alert the other chickens when there's a hawk flying overhead. Happens a lot with airplanes too, which kind of bums out my neighbors, but you get the point. There's that. And then there's also like this other sort of lesser threat that's like an ongoing threat, that when the chickens are out and the coop is open, it's basically a free-for-all for the sparrows that are around. And they're not really causing any problems, but they eat all the food. So it would just be fun to, like, as we talk, to keep going back to this analogy, and then it will be I will be able to construct a more convincing argument to the IRS. Are we allowed to talk about the name at all? Thycotic? How did that come about? It's such an interesting name.
It's okay. So our founder is an interesting person. He's a good friend of mine. He's brilliant. He's a developer, a techie by trade, but he had a laser tag team, and they were called the Thycotic Wabbits.
Okay.
And the name Thycotic stuck with him as he, created his own business. It was unique and no one else had it, and it was memorable. And yeah, I could have made up a story about the Greek god Thykos and the almighty security god, but I decided to tell you the truth.
It's such a fun name. But that explains a lot.
I have a chicken coop analogy. So, you threw it out there and you made me think about it. So you got to give us the opportunity to say something about it.
My listeners love chickens. So
okay. So obviously it came out of left field, right? Never really associated chickens or chicken coops with what we do, but it is security, right? So when you purchased your chicken coop and you kind of set it up, and then you realized you wanted to make some upgrades to it, right? You wanted to make it better. You wanted to make it different. What did you do? I'm assuming you did it yourself, right? You looked at how you wanted to upgrade it, and you did it yourself.
Yeah.
What we do here at Thycotic is really interesting in that respect, is that when customers look at our solution and their needs, and they look at our competitors have a very interesting model in that if a customer wants to make improvements or make changes to how it's deployed, then they can't do it themselves. They need to hire that company to do it for them. So in essence, a customer says, wow, I'd like to customize my security system or chicken coop, right? They're not able to do it themselves. They have to wait, sometimes weeks, for the vendor of that solution to come on site and customize it, which creates a lot of problems. Imagine if you have a chicken coop and you're losing chickens to an animal and you have to wait several weeks to have somebody come and fix it for you when you could have done it yourself, right? That's very frustrating, right? And that's complexity to what you're doing with chicken coops and with us with security. So we have a unique solution where customers, when they want to customize a Thycotic solution, we empower them to do it themselves, which makes for a much more robust user experience. I think it is very unique in the marketplace. We are really the only ones in the marketplace that allow customers to make their own customization with some scripting capabilities, which alleviates a lot of customer issues. So just the same way that you're able to fix and improve your chicken coop, we allow customers to improve their Thycotic implementation.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So now I have to give my chicken analogy, because the chicken analogy that I thought of was the fox or the mole, maybe the mole in the chicken soup, right? Because when attackers gain privileged access, they're appearing to be a trusted insider, right? So the chickens don't realize that the threat is there, and that, I think, is a large issue. I mean, depending on the latest study you guys have seen, like the average dwell time is over 200 days. So you're talking weeks, if not months, maybe even years, right, before the chicken finds that the fox is in the coop. And by that point, well, all your chickens have already been eaten. So
I think even more so the sparrows, because the chickens really are completely oblivious to these sparrows coming in, yet, they turn around and all the food's gone.
There you go.
It's that same kind of thing. So is what you're talking about the benefit of moving to the cloud? Because, one of the big things you tout on your website is privileged access management at cloud scale and speed. So is that the whole deal with moving from on-premises to the cloud, or are there additional benefits to moving to the cloud?
I think that, speed is a big one. We do see more and more organizations that are moving towards the cloud because of infrastructure costs, scalability costs. I also think, that plays a component as well. So if organizations choose to leverage our cloud solutions, there's very little overhead. There's very little required infrastructure that they need. So I think that that's also a component that we see.
If you could clarify, what's the difference between DevOps Secret Vault and DevOps SDK?
Of course. So DevOps SDK is a feature of Secret Server, and it's for, hard-coded or embedded passwords and credentials or keys, whether this is in scripts or config files or inside the CI/CD pipeline, at a low volume. Okay, so if we think like 10 API calls per minute. Now, DevOps Secret Vault is all cloud-based and is designed for high-velocity DevOps teams. So here we're talking about like 1,000 API calls per minute. So very different in terms of the scalability. And again, it really just depends on the organization and their requirements related to making sure they don't have any hard-coded or embedded passwords.
Great. Okay. You talk about secrets a lot also on the site. I was just wondering, like, secrets management, is this a standard term, or is this something that you've created? What are secrets, and what is secret management about?
So secrets can be anything, right? It can be so much more than just a username and a password. It really just depends on what the organization cares about, what they're terming, they want to control access to. They want to maybe remove from any type of vulnerable place like a DevOps CI/CD pipeline. So it can be SSH keys, it can be product licenses, it can be encryption files, it can be PIN numbers or credit card numbers, really any type of sensitive asset that an IT organization owns and manages.
I see. And now
I heard the chicken.
Just like on cue, the chickens they're going crazy. Sometimes they'll go crazy to celebrate an egg laying, which is really weird.
So from a practical perspective, when a user or a company is looking to engage and to get Secret Server specifically, I think the best analogy that people might be able to relate to is something like a LastPass, a password manager for their own personal sites, the things that they log into. Is that a fair assessment? Is that the idea of how the product works in the environment, in the infrastructure?
I think of LastPass as a sophisticated vault. So there's, definitely a level of comparison, because for Secret Server, at its most basic level, that's what it is a vault, right? But the real reason why organizations look to purchase and implement is with the active capabilities. So to geek out for a minute, right, if we think of like the top 20 critical security controls, right, it all starts with inventory of assets, right, hardware and software assets. And that's where we see organizations start, is with the discovery. If I don't know something exists on my network, how can I actively manage and secure it? So Secret Server looks into an organization, it finds unknown accounts, variety of different types of accounts, and then pulls those into the vault for active management. And when I say active management, I'm talking about access control. I'm talking about automated password rotation. I'm talking about, making it very easy for folks to connect to these sensitive systems through our launcher capabilities. It's literally a click of a button. It's configured as a proxy. So it's very, very secure underneath the hood for folks that need access to these sensitive systems. And again, there's all types of different controls and workflows that folks can use as part of that process, right? So things like request for access, monitoring, keystroke logging, all that good stuff. And another big thing we see with organizations in Secret Server is the integration component. So, we firmly believe in defense in depth. We want organizations to take our solutions and implement them with other tech and security solutions, whether it's their ticketing system, their vulnerability scanning, two-factor, multi-factor, things like that. We want to be, able to fit in well and adapt to all organizations' environments. So it's really the active components, right? I do think that more people and personally should use password vaults in their personal life. But surprisingly, if you think about the gap there, there's still a significant amount of organizations that are trying to use LastPass for privilege access, or even worse, using Excel spreadsheets or other tools that really are not designed for the business, for the organization that has, larger security requirements.
Right. And when you talk about the probing of various environments and the servers within, how does that work? Is there something that's installed on site for a customer that then does the probing? You give that X amount of account access and it can reach out and look at every single server on the list?
Yeah, kind of. So it depends on what we're discovering. I don't know how technical you want to get, but if we're looking for like Windows stuff, we're using WMI. We're looking for like Unix, Linux stuff. A secret server administrator would drop in a range of IP addresses, then we would connect machine to machine, identifying all different types of local accounts. If we're looking for hypervisors, it's using, VMware API. So it really just kind of depends on what the organization is looking for. But to touch on what Larry mentioned a few moments back, we also allow our customers to leverage PowerShell scripting. And this is a large competitive advantage because, they don't have to come to us when they want to find, their AWS cloud accounts, or if they're looking for something in Azure, or if they're looking for something at the database level, SQL links, or even if they're searching their CI/CD pipeline for embedded passwords and things like that. So, the ability to take the tool, leverage PowerShell for customizations and discovery capabilities beyond just what we have out of the box is something that our customers really appreciate.
Yeah, and this is George Contino. I have to second that. I've been touching the security elements a little bit more head on over the last 2 years. I mean, coming from an infrastructure background, security is always part of, our practice from a day-to-day perspective. But, leading discussions with customers more from the security side of things, as of late, reinforces some of that, in that with some of the solutions that are out there, the complexity to configure those things and the requirements for the consumers to ultimately leverage the professional services of those organizations and what have you, sometimes just prove to be not cost efficient, if you will, complex to administer, to change, as your business is dynamically changing and the like, and those costs just keep piling up. One of the things I've been impressed with through a number of presentations now and sitting in and getting to see the Thycotic solution is that ability right there. I think is a huge benefit in that it is .NET based. There is a very big library of resources that Thycotic provides to that. The other thing behind that too, and I don't know if the team wants to expand on it, there are resources behind the scenes that if a consumer is ultimately having changes, trying to take one of those templates to manipulate it, the resources and capabilities of the Thycotic team on the back end to support some of that through deployment. Just from where I've been sitting and kind of working through it, it's been really nice to see as well. So I don't know if you want to expand on some of that too, right? It's, yes, you have these libraries, if you will, to really help the consumer do many things, but what about the support aspect of things to really help tune and adjust some of those templates, if you will?
Yeah, so I think that's also a competitive advantage. So as you mentioned, like Thycotic, we're built on the Microsoft stack. You can pick up the hood, you can look underneath. It's just a Microsoft SQL database. You can tweak, you can harden, you can, there's nothing proprietary or unknown about the technology that we use under the hood. And I think that, we have gone out of our way to really focus on that usable security aspect. So, we empower our customers through documentation, through knowledge-based articles, through best practices guides. My team personally, we manage a whole, training and enablement program, whether it's online videos or courses, or, we come on site and we, show up and we train customers on, best practices and configurations and how to, make the most of the tool. And then, you get even further into our professional services team. They're really, really focused on knowledge transfer, making sure that we're focusing on teaching our customers how to fish instead of just fishing for them. And our pro services team also comes with the best practices in mind, so making sure we're adapting the solution to be as secure as possible, but also making sure that we're valuing the convenience aspects and the adaptability and the extensibility that our customers are expecting from a tool like this. Because, what we've seen, as you mentioned, with some of the competitors, there's a lot of costs and complexity associated with this tool. Security should not be difficult. Bruce Schneier, complexity is the enemy of security. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that concept. So, I think that going out of our way to empower folks and make sure that things are easy in the tool. And then if they do have challenges, there's always somebody at Thycotic to help. We have a support team, follow the sun, 8x8 is standard, but we do offer 24/7. So wherever you are in the world, if it's between 8x8, there's always somebody to call and get connected to immediately for any type of troubleshooting or best practices or questions related to feature function. I mean, our team is really just focused on making sure that people are seeing value from the tool, they're using it, they're tweaking it, they're customizing it, it's working as they expect in their environment, which is crucial.
I just want to make sure that people know that Anexinet and Thycotic are in a partnership, and so we will be actively providing Thycotic's offerings to our clients, and happy and excited to do that as well. So can you just tell me a little bit about what's in the current environment, what's changed in the world that's necessitated this new level of security?
I think it's the sophistication and the severity of the threats. I mean, I'm sure you guys see the news. More and more, these catastrophic organizational breaches are becoming public knowledge. Not only does that, it's embarrassing, number one, especially when you get into the Equifaxes and, the RSAs and, some of these organizations that the U.S. government, who you really would expect to be doing a little bit better when it comes to cybersecurity. But, that I think that just reflects with the changing landscape. There's always something new. There's always a new threat. Literally 3 billion new pieces of malware introduced every single year. I mean, just think about trying to keep up with that type of threat. There's always going to be.
Did you say billion?
Yeah, with a B. Billion. And then think about the future, right? Think about machine learning, think about AI, think about, quantum computing. I know you guys talk about that stuff. All these things are going to continue to increase the sophistication and the severity of cyber threats. And it's about defense in depth. It's about layering. It's about making sure organizations take simple security steps that can exponentially increase an organization's overall security posture.
I think this is George. I think another part of it is compliance, data, just data privacy compliance in general, whether it's healthcare, defense, and the like, right? I mean, there are, data privacy, GDPR, CCPA coming up. There are just a number of regulations. SOC 2, if your company wants to move forward with the SOC compliance and wants to add a data privacy element. Right? When you start looking at some of the security elements that are out there, that organizations, both large and small to medium size, as they aspire to become larger companies and do more and more, especially on the front and the like, right? Most of the businesses you're touching base with, are requiring third-party risk assessments, security assessments that go with that, right? I'm about to do business with you. How compliant are you with regards to handling, touching, and some of those type of things? So you start looking at, just internally with regards to being ready for any of those compliances, right? And privilege access management, identity access management, and all of those things are just huge parts of all of those compliance efforts, right? And the IT organizations within every company sometimes just do not have the manpower to keep up. and trying to do it on a manual or as a status quo type of operation, if you will, at the end of the day, may be able to sustain it for so long, but over time, they're going to be overwhelmed as the business grows and moves in other areas. So in my opinion, right, there are just solutions such as Thycotic where, you're implementing that. It can help you with your onboarding and offboarding processes, right? All of that threat, the management of those security IDs, right? An administrator, instead of having, George is in this job today and he's moving into this job tomorrow, who's cleaning up that change of privilege from one side of the business to another side? Because over time, what typically has happened in most organizations is George just gets another set of rights, and George moves to another position, gets another set of rights. And then Chris comes in, or like, give Chris the same rights as George, and Chris is brand new, right? And essentially you get that cascading of effect. Something like this, privilege access management and the like, is really just going to help, organizations from a humanity perspective keep the house in order, within internally, right? The ability to, keep those IDs remote, those privileged IDs redacted, if you will, an ability to access those scenes on a checkout basis or what have you, or monitoring of those sessions, with regards to administrative tasks and the like, using it as training tools. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can start to unravel when it comes to privilege access. But back to the main point is, looking at a solution like this can really just, you don't have to come out and boil the ocean. There are things that you can slowly do implementing this tool to really help get your house in order, keep yourself sane, from an administrative standpoint, and look to cascade out this particular solution in this area to really cover a wide range of tasks and the like to keep yourself compliant and secure. Right? So I mean, I digress there, but.
And I think the story extends, right? One of the things we haven't talked about, I think people, we've been talking about the organization, right? And the people in the organization. What about people to the external organization, right? And I'm not even speaking about the hackers, but I'm speaking specifically about vendors, third-party vendors and contractors, exactly, that need access to the system to do a job. What happens to those credentials? And I think, at least in my mind, and I don't want to say where it all started, but kind of what's etched in my mind is the Target hack from a few years ago, right? And that was catastrophic to the organization for quite a while. Stock price, customer loyalty, all those things took a major hit. And essentially what it was credentials that an HVAC contractor had to get access to the system to do what they needed to do, but it wasn't properly managed from a security perspective.
Right, exactly. The ability to kind of set that ID, check it out to that resource, who's a third party, ability to let them through, monitoring that, and, and kind of recording everything that goes along with it, right? Versus you standing over their shoulder while they're doing something on your system and the like. Just, we don't scale. We just don't operate like that anymore. And having tools like this to help with that protection is really beneficial in so many fronts.
Do you see that as being like the biggest threat? Is there a single biggest threat?
Internal. I mean, in my opinion, insider threat, and whether it's on purpose or or not, right? It's most of that. In my opinion, most threat happens from inside out. You know what I mean? With regards to this, so that's obviously a big part of it. But there's still external exposures. But in my opinion, I would think most threats start internally, right? And just leaving a doorway open, if you will. I don't know if I kind of want to expand on that, but at least that's from my position. I would think it would be more.
The insider threats and obviously it includes the vendors and contractors, right? We kind of still, in some cases, consider that the internal threat. And then also we see a lot of use cases, customers coming to us are very concerned about their service accounts. And Katie may be able to talk about that further, but essentially, we talked about these human accounts, right? With people, with passwords. But what about these non-human accounts? And there are some very complex interdependencies within these service accounts that's very difficult to manage and becomes a very, very, very big concern for customers. How do we manage these service accounts that really aren't associated with people? They're associated with systems and applications and devices that tend to sprawl and tend to really be very difficult to manage and change passwords on without breaking something.
So how are you able to secure those? Is it through a system of constantly changing passwords or?
Yeah. So, service accounts, are you familiar with what is a service account? It has a job on the network, right? So it's running SharePoint, it's taking backups, it's running web pools, it's doing X, Y, Z, ABC. But they're domain admin accounts, right? So they're heavily privileged in a Windows environment, but they don't map to any individual's identity. So really what SQL Server does, as always, starts off with the discovery, and it finds any dependencies. So it finds the SharePoint dependency, it finds the backup dependency, and then it allows those dependencies to be updated as part of the password change process. So SQL Server, reaches directly into Active Directory, updates the password there, and then goes to all of those dependent services and updates the passwords as well. Now, what we really, provide to our customers is, again, the ability to customize to their process and their environment. So they can sort their order of operations, they can introduce pauses or delays as machines need to reboot or restart, and then, again, allow them to successfully change these passwords. And I think, again, it just kind of comes back to like a 101. If you don't change your password, if I'm a hacker and I have forever in a day to crack your password, I probably will crack your password. And again, these are domain administrative privileges. So, you need to make sure that organizations are regularly rotating these passwords and tying back into the insider threat. A lot of these accounts are shared. They're non-human accounts, so they're shared across teams. And as people leave the organization, as people join the organization, they're literally walking out the door with the keys to the kingdom. So all layers of threats come in with these non-human accounts. And as you guys know, with more machine-to-machine, app-to-app communication going on, this problem is getting larger and larger for a lot of organizations.
What is the turnover rate like in technology? I mean, just personally, it seems to be pretty high, but do you have statistics on that kind of thing?
I do not have any stats on that, no.
It's an important question, the retention rate of a customer. If somebody, if Bob has X amount of account access and he leaves the company and nobody's paying attention to his account and it stays open, now it's an attack vector.
I could share stories. I have a ton of stories about catastrophic insider breaches.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, there's a Japanese pharmaceutical company, and they were looking to, expand North American operations. They acquired a organization based out of Atlanta, Georgia, called Shield Pharma. There was a gentleman working there named James, and James was an IT guy. He had been with the organization for a while, but as the merger and acquisition went down, he became, unhappy with how the future of the organization looked. So he ended up leaving the organization. A few months later, they needed additional IT support. They asked Jason to come back as a contractor consultant. He again was there for a few months, and at that point got a better feel for how the organization was turning and was really unhappy with the state and what the organization had done to his buddies, his former colleagues and coworkers. So he was terminated from that position. Decided a few months later that he was going to take revenge, and through privilege access that had not been terminated when he was fired, he was able to successfully delete 88 virtual machines off their network. So he completely crippled the organization. Took him about 2 weeks to clean up from that mess. Cost them almost $1 million. I mean, he literally they couldn't ship product. They couldn't cut checks to their vendors or their employees. He deleted their Exchange server, so they could not even communicate internally. Just absolutely wiped them out for a solid 2 weeks. So interestingly, the FBI came in, they did a little bit of forensic analysis, used the IP address to trace the source of the attack, and it ended up originating from a McDonald's. So they went to the McDonald's and they got some security footage and some, records of sales from that day, and was foolish enough to swipe his credit card for his Big Mac that day, and that is how he got caught. So, I could literally tell you a million different stories on insider threat. Now it's not the time. If you want to buy me a beer, we can continue to have this conversation.
I think it's important because this is one of the things that a lot of organizations just don't necessarily think about, onboarding and offboarding, and especially in the situation where someone needs to be offboarded immediately. Privileged access management, having a significant investment in that space makes it so that you can literally snap your fingers and person X is completely cut off from the network, from every single potential revenge vector, if you will.
And what we typically see is people think, oh, well, I disabled their AD account, that's enough. But let me tell you, that is not nearly enough. And I think, again, one of the unique advantages that Secret Server brings to the customer, to the organization, is we have a user audit report. So literally, as the person is walking out the door, as they're being escorted out of the building, you can pull this user audit report. You can specify the date range. So maybe you go back 6 weeks, maybe you go back 6 months, or maybe you go back 6 years. But as that person is walking out the door, you're automatically, through the software, changing every single password that that person has access within that date range. So, anything outside of AD, anything outside of Active Directory, networking equipment, Linux boxes, and so on, all those passwords are being rotated. So they are not walking out the door with any type of privilege access.
I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like monitoring, auditing, keeping track of logs of these types of things. Does Thycotic have their own product? Do they connect into external services that do that sort of thing?
We can integrate with, third-party tools, but we also bring our own capabilities. So full audit, every single action inside of Secret Server is audited. Lots and lots of out-of-the-box reports. We also encourage customers to create their own custom reports. Again, it's not rocket science. This is simple SQL queries. You're just querying the database. So it's very easy to, create your own custom reports, set up scheduled reports that need to go to, a compliance officer or an auditor or somebody in that type of role. And we offer very detailed session monitoring and recording. So, what I typically recommend for organizations that have anything within scope of compliance, and definitely depending on the sensitivity of the IT asset. So monitoring is also very commonly used for access into like their DCs, their domain controllers, and things like that. So what we're doing is we're taking a video of that sensitive system access. We're capturing full keystrokes, any processes or any activities, any executables, anything that's going on underneath the hood. And one of the cool things that we do is we provide what's called a heat map. So if an auditor does need to come in and watch that session, they have the heat map so they can jump around to when the most activity took place, as well as the key log details. So, really empowers them, again, to have it easy to kind of dig through the data and find, was this, a simple human error or something malicious going on here? Now, we do recommend that folks deploy our Secret Server monitoring agent on all of their Windows servers. And the reason why is because of something called server-side monitoring. So if somebody does backdoor access that box, the agent is actually sharp enough that it will pick up on that activity, it will video record it and monitor it, and it will send that data back to Secret Server. So again, just an additional layer of protection and controls available on these sensitive systems.
That's awesome. So we're getting to a point where we can start to wrap up. Where do you see Thycotic going in the future, and how are you preparing the company to handle future threats, or how are you looking to anticipate future threats and prepare for them?
I really see our organization moving more and more of our emphasis and focus to the cloud. So if we think about AWS and Azure and the layers within these environments, EC2 instances, I see us building more and more discovery and active management capabilities supporting organizations that are moving towards the cloud. So we already kind of talked about how we have all of our, privilege access solutions in the cloud. We're, not only an on-prem shop, but we have everything in the cloud as well. And I think not only are we thinking PAM in the cloud, but PAM for the cloud. So I personally, go out of my way to make sure I'm educated on the latest threats. I try and geek out and read blogs and articles and YouTube videos and keep up to date, because it's my job to then transfer that knowledge to our team, to our partners, to our new hires, to our customers, and just make sure that they are empowered as possible on the latest and the greatest threats, as well as how Thycotic solutions can help mitigate those threats and eliminate those risks.
Lastly, we like to look at some future emerging technologies and how companies are adopting these technologies. So you talked about AI and machine learning a little bit earlier, and quantum computing also. How are you approaching these new technologies and incorporating them into your offerings?
We're using them. The hackers and the threats are using them, so we have to use these new technologies too to keep up. And I think that is really the focus of Thycotic is, to stay up to date, to understand the latest threat, and to make sure that we're, staying in line with what the industry is, whether it's machine learning or emphasis on cloud, just making sure that we're providing all the capabilities to help our organizations and our customers eliminate these types of very advanced threats. I mean, AI is pretty scary when it comes to security. I can't imagine a tool that, misses the first time and then figures out why it missed and how to do better and gets you the second time on its own. That's pretty scary to me. But again, at Thycotic, it's our job to understand that and adapt to that and prevent that.
George, Chris, do you guys have any other questions that you wanted to ask about before we start to wrap up here?
I have one question. How do you think that Thycotic and their products scale for a company that's very small versus a company that is very large?
Okay, so again, simple security, right? Like long passwords, complex passwords, passwords that are rotating. I think that PAM is a program, not a project. There's a sliding scale of maturity. So starting with basic steps that can exponentially increase an organization's security posture is really where small to medium-sized organizations start. If they're using LastPass, if they're using Excel, if they're using sticky notes, there's something better. And simply making that first step into a tool that's designed for privileged access management is really where I see, the first step for organizations. Now, for Thycotic, our pricing and licensing is meant to be custom. So we can sell, solutions that are $3,000, $30,000, $300,000, or $3 million. So, our solutions really do scale based on the functional requirements as well as the budgetary considerations of all different sized organizations. And once you get to that large, mid-enterprise or even global enterprise organization, that's when you're talking about the next level of maturity, really, with your PAM program. So that's when you're talking about, machine learning and behavior analytics and cloud and integrations with other security solutions, SIM integrations, vulnerability scanning integrations, CI/CD pipeline stuff, and so on and so on. So, I think we all have to start somewhere, like, basic password security, changing them, long, complex passwords, controlling who has access. And I think that that's a easy way to start using Thycotic Secret Server and the rest of our tools.
That's great. Thank you, Katie and Larry, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we're just so happy to be partnered with you and to be able to offer, added value to our clients as a result. We're very excited about all the possibilities.
I have one last question, and then we can probably let these guys go. And that is, now that we've solved the chicken situation, what are you guys preparing for the upcoming turkey apocalypse?
Oh, that is a tough question.
That's a tough one.
I'm at a loss for words on that one. I would need 3 minutes to come up with a snappy response to that. So Katie's better at snappy responses than I am.
I'm looking over at our chickens here, and it's kind of interesting. They're currently dust bathing, which is yet another level of invader repulsion, I guess, if you will, because they dust bathe because the dirt that they kick into their feathers, it kills any mites that are in their skin, like directly biting at them. It's very funny that this would happen right now.
Before we let you guys go, is there anything that you want to talk about, things that we haven't discussed that you want to give some airtime to?
I think the only thing I'd like to add before we go is Gartner's one of those consulting companies that a lot of folks in technology look at when they're ever planning projects, doing analysis. And last year, Gartner came out with a top 10 list of CISO projects, right? Saying, hey, Mr. CISO, these are the projects for 2018 you should be looking at. And PAM, Privilege Access Management, that we're talking about here today, was the number one project ranked by Gartner. Same thing for 2019. So clearly the thought leadership in the industry is, if you're not instituting a privilege access management solution, you ought to be, right to the security leadership. And really that's it. We talk to security officers, directors of security, compliances officer every day. And it's really interesting the number of customers that aren't using a privilege access management solution, right? They're using spreadsheets, as Katie mentioned earlier. They're even using sticky notes. In some cases, they're not even removing admin passwords that come with the device or an application, right? They're just leaving it as that vendor default. So customers who have not been looking at privilege access as a project, really ought to be kind of peeling back the layers of their security posture and looking at how privilege access management can help strengthen that.
Well, that's a perfect wrap up, Larry. Thanks.
Sure.
And we really look forward to working with you guys more in the future. So, and again, thanks for hopping on and joining us today. And so thanks everybody, Katie, Larry, Chris, and George. Really appreciate you guys taking your time to come on here.
Oh, of course. My pleasure.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Modern Digital Enterprise podcast, part of the Anexinet podcast network. Take care. Bye-bye.